Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on this webinar with the Nevada Department of Business and Industry, Small Business Resource. My name is Rob. I am the Business Development Officer here at the Nevada Business Opportunity Fund and the Nevada Women's Business Center. And with me is Marcel Schaerer, who is the Deputy Director of the Department of Business and Industry and also an entrepreneur. Welcome, Marcel. Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation. And of course, I always embrace our partnership, which is just so fantastic.
Absolutely. We've been doing over the last number of years we've hosted classes together, we've done fairs together, we've been involved in a lot of your events, and you've been involved in a lot of ours. So it's been a really great partnership helping local small businesses all over Nevada, actually.
And I mean it when I say that, Rob, because I think it has been wonderful. The synergy, I think the energy level, and
I really liked it.
What we bring to the table for the benefit, of course, of the small sector and entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. And I think it's really great, too, that you understand entrepreneurship, not just from having seen people and helped people be entrepreneurs, but you yourself, you and your wife, actually, are entrepreneurs. So if you can talk about that a little bit and give us some background.
You know the story for most cases, but in 1996, my wife and I really put together our heads to start a business focusing on workforce development, because that's what first and foremost of what we do.
You mean like a staffing agency? Or
No, it's not a staffing, but basically providing training and enhancing communications, doing some diversity training, translation services for what we call the new workforce. But it's specifically given the percentage of the Hispanic population in the state, which is give and take 30%. And if you can imagine, some workplaces throughout the state, especially manufacturing, are primarily run in the production area by the Hispanic workforce. So if there is a language barrier, something else needed to happen there.
Okay.
So we built on that, saying, well, we need to enhance communications in the workplace because there is a language barrier, there are cultural implications, and in many cases, it's not just the production area, but also management level, not necessarily understanding where these individuals are coming from. And it's not to give any excuses for not performing or production or quality, but just to understand where people are coming from when there is indeed a language barrier, number one, and there are some cultural differences along the way. So that's what we have been doing since 1996.
Okay.
And it has been just a wonderful journey.
Okay, so let's talk about you and your wife are in business together.
Yes.
And a lot of times we read things or we hear things that going into business with your spouse is a great thing, and then we hear that going into business with your spouse can be the end of your marriage, the end of your relationship. How have you and your wife managed, because you've been married, 36 years?
37 years.
37 years.
This December, yes.
So how have you managed that balance between business and personal?
I think, right from the beginning, and it has to do with the skill set. I really love the training component.
Okay.
And she likes the human resources portion of it. So I think part of the success is division of labor.
Okay.
Because given personalities, she knows what she needs to do. I know what I need to do. And I have my own ways and she has her own ways. So can you imagine if we try to combine efforts on a project? It's like oil and vinegar. We both work together, but you need to understand what we bring to the table. And I think that is important, for people considering that the chemistry may be there as a married couple, but you have to really understand and do a self-assessment when it comes to what you bring to the table. And basically divide up and trust the other person. That she will bring and she will maximize and do things effectively. And I will do my portion also doing it that way. And it has worked tremendously. So I may have an idea what she's doing and she has an idea what I am doing, but we keep things totally separate.
Okay. So for anybody out there who may be watching who's in business with their spouse or even maybe a best friend, because I think a lot of the same dynamics are there.
Absolutely.
When it comes to an important decision, and let's say, and I'm sure it's happened in the number of years you've been in business, you're here and your wife is here. How do you come to that place where you can actually make the decision for the business? Do you know what I mean?
Well, when I think, again, it's just sitting down and dividing up.
Okay.
Like we said, if it is workforce development and we're going to focus on primarily training and human resources services, let's just divide up from the beginning.
So even the decisions.
Absolutely. As projects come in, it's no-brainer. At that point, you already know who is going to take it over.
Okay. Oh, that's excellent.
And that has been the formula for us.
Okay.
And even them, and at the moment of truth, when the person is telling you what the project is just to trust almost 100%.
Okay.
And not question things, because I think once you start questioning things is very easily, I think, given personalities and characters, that things can go the other way.
True.
And you start splitting hairs and basically getting into situations that are not just going to be healthy for the business. So that would be my biggest advice for anyone looking at, joining us for this program, that they really consider that.
Okay. So when you and your wife first started, I'm assuming you had dreams of what you wanted your business to be.
Right.
And then there's the reality of how all of that ultimately played out. And some of it, I'm sure, was great. What was the biggest challenge that you faced? Let's say the biggest unexpected challenge and how did you overcome that? Just so we can help other people that might run into a similar challenge.
I think the biggest challenge is prioritizing what you're going to be offered. The biggest challenge, I think, is to find the clarity of what you can do well.
Okay.
Because the noise is out there to present to you and to basically say yes to everything. And in some cases, Rob, let's face it, I always say the answer is yes, and then you just need to work the details.
Okay.
But I think, at least to us, was what do we need to focus on? And that is what I have shared in some of my presentations when you were there, that what's the value proposition?
Right.
What is it that you bring to the table? And really took some time out of that challenge to say, well, we are going to focus on things that will enhance communications in the workplace.
Right.
And given the level, having a skill set of bilingual ability, experience in human resources, in the case of Sylvia, or in my case, the training component, then it was to say, well, this is the menu that we can do well, because obviously there has been some other requests and we have to say no because we were not ready for it.
Right. I really like that you brought up value proposition, because I think that's really where most businesses, new businesses especially, do go wrong. Because even if they have a really great product and a really great service, if you can't communicate the value proposition of that, it could be the most amazing thing out there, but if people don't understand it and they don't get it, then it's still not going to go anywhere, no matter how amazing it is.
Well, several years ago, now in my capacity already being in the small business sector, I helped someone that had a restaurant, and you open the menu, it was like 75 different things to offer them. That is huge.
It is huge.
And that's fine and dandy. Is an individual decision, but I kept saying to this particular one is, can you focus and minimize, decrease this by 75% if you can. And the questioning was, well, but that's what people want. Well, but how is that impacting your bottom line?
Well, and I always use the example of Innout Burger, right? You've got McDonald's and all these places with 50 things on their menu, and Innout's got a burger, a double burger, a few other things, French fries. There's no chicken, and they always have a line. They always have a line.
And that was my point. Thank you for bringing it up, Rob, because that was one of the examples to say you don't have to go to a very lean menu like that.
Right.
But also, if you combine that with the layout of the place, because a lot of people, you and I, go into an In-N-Out burger, we are hungry or we order.
Right.
But how many of us really pay attention of the internal layout? It's a science.
Right.
If you look
Absolutely.
at all the details, where people are standing, who is cooking, how many, the nice flow of getting the raw material and giving you a product
Absolutely.
is to really maximize your resources and minimize your expenses.
Yes.
And that was the whole point of this conversation with this particular individual.
Wow. Well, I'm really glad you brought that up. So I want to shift gears now.
Sure.
And because you not only have your own business, but you're also the deputy director of business and industry. So when I first met you, I thought business and industry was this, really big organization that focused on, the biggest companies out there.
Right.
That was wrong, a wrong perception I had. Can you explain a little bit about business and industry, or B&I, and what you guys do?
And the Department of Business and Industry was created in 1963. In fact, this fiscal year has been in existence 55 years.
Oh, wow.
But the idea was initially a combination of commerce and regulatory authority. And when I say that is, I always tell people, it's on one hand is the regulatory piece, but on the other hand is basically to promote and encourage the development and growth of the small business sector and entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Because, and you can say that in a big way, but I always ask people, think about the numbers. We have give and take a range of, I will say, 247,000 to 249,000 small businesses in Nevada. That is
249,000 small businesses in Nevada,
right,
with a population of only about plus or minus 3 million.
Keep in mind, then you can break it down into what is considered businesses with one employee.
Oh, okay, got it.
Or a lot of businesses who happen to just be a person doing babysitting.
Okay.
Or a consultant, and you have been in the world of consulting, which is basically you don't have any employees, but it's a business.
Now, what do you consider a small business? Like, how big can a small business be? That it's still a small business.
The Small Business Administration basically gives this 500 or less employees, but the reality in Nevada is that basically a lot of them are 10 employees or less.
Okay.
So the numbers go into that 240, let's say 249,000 small businesses. Basically, 95% of them, or 92, are small businesses.
Okay.
Hiring about 40% of the workforce.
Wow.
So those are big numbers. So my point, going back to what you're saying, what is the Department of Business and Industry, is basically also to facilitate the interaction and the growth of the small business sector.
Okay.
And for that, of course, we do it by just being this source of information.
Okay, so could you explain, because maybe a lot of people aren't clear, what is the difference between the SBA and business and industry?
Well, the Small Business Administration is the federal umbrella.
Okay.
When it comes to the small business sector. And I always say, and I provide the umbrella, says, think about the SBA, federal. And then from there, they provide money, of course, to a place like yours, the Nevada Business Opportunity Fund, the Nevada Small Business Development Center, and SCORE.
Absolutely.
Because those are the agencies that will deliver the services.
Okay.
Either by providing counseling in most cases. We are the state.
Okay. So you don't fall under the SBA at all?
It's separate.
Okay,
there
got
is
it.
overlapping, but it's a separate institution. And it goes back to what I was just saying. We are the regulatory authority on one hand.
Okay.
On the other hand, we promote, but we are promoting what SBA does,
Got
what
it.
your agency does for the state.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, and you know this, Rob, a lot of people don't know what they need to do. They don't
Right.
have the roadmap. Maybe to you and I makes sense what we all do from a program perspective, but at the end of the day, someone who wants to start a business, he or she only needs have a specific needs.
Right.
And all these wonderful resources are all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But someone has to be, or in this case, business and industry has to be that portal that basically provides information and resources to individuals.
Right. Well,
So
I love-
hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I love that you and I share that passion for getting that information out there and letting
Right.
people, helping people find out what it is they don't know, and then really guiding them through that. So I know that business and industry, you guys have a really great web portal. So what can people do? You want to, if you want to give the address, and then
Absolutely.
you know, what can people
This-
find on
and
it? and
Thank
do?
you for mentioning that, Rob. The portal is business.nv for Nevada.gov. So business.nv.gov. And again, we're not competing from what you do.
Oh, us?
Exactly.
Oh, no, we don't compete at all.
We're not competing with SCORE.
No.
We're not competing with the Small Business Development Center. We are basically showcasing all the capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So when people access business.nv.gov, it's basically to say, well, I need to know something more about licensing.
Okay.
I would like to know something about workspaces or incubators. I would like to have an understanding of the legal framework that is needed for my business.
Okay.
I would like to know about a business plan. And then we are just providing the links to all these wonderful resources for them to access that information. And when people call our office, we are always putting them in contact. In many cases, I will be sort of the bridge that will arrange even a meeting because people need help.
Absolutely.
You know, it goes back to what you're saying that, people don't know. And a lot of us in the small business world, we know the resources,
Right.
but many people don't.
I would
And if you
say
want
most don't.
to do business in Elko or
Mhm.
Yarrington, where are the resources there?
Right.
So this portal tries to provide that for the entire state.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the regulations, because obviously
Sure.
that's where business and industry is. You focus a lot on regulations. And when you and I have done classes together, you talk a lot about some of the regulations. So can you elaborate a little bit on that and maybe give some of the people watching a few of an idea of some of the regulations they really need to keep in mind? Like, for example, workers' comp,
Absolutely.
which we talked about a lot.
So, in the macro picture, again, going back to business and industry, we have 13 divisions under that umbrella.
Okay.
And I'm not going to bore you or the audience with all of them, but just to give you an idea, division of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you want to sell property here, you need to have a license.
So let me ask you a question, because I get a lot of phone calls where people say, I want to start, let's say daycare. I just got that about a week ago. What do I need to do? Is that something they would go to your site and then find out you need this license and this certification?
No, that would be a different
Okay.
one. These are more, you were talking about industries.
Okay.
So if you talk about the insurance division or insurance, that's
Okay.
one industry, and we provide that regulatory environment. If you talk
Okay.
about real estate, we provide that. If you want to become a Uber or Lyft driver, the Nevada Transportation Authority provides that regulation
it.
for the industry
Got it. Okay.
and some of the licensing.
Okay.
But also, equally as you were asking, the Division of Labor or the Labor Commissioner is also under our umbrella. So a lot of people will, when they face labor disputes, they need a place where to go. So they will go and formalize that because there are regulations in terms of, minimum wage, state wages,
Right.
what you need to pay overtime, and those are the type of disputes.
Okay.
We have a division of industrial relations, and that has to do with workers' compensation, which is another huge area.
Right.
That the moment, and we always say that, and I love that about you, Rob, that you always also bring it out. The moment that you have one employee, guess what?
You need workers' comp. And a lot of people think you need 3 or 5 or 10.
Exactly.
But what if that one employee is your cousin, best friend, niece, nephew? Do you still need workers' comp if it's a family member that you're employing?
I will say yes.
Okay. Well, because I get asked that a lot.
Unless, like in my case, going back to my small business, Sylvia and I, we were the primary, but we created a limited liability corporation.
Okay.
So we split partnership,
So you're not employees.
but we are not employees.
Okay.
But the moment that we hire someone, it doesn't matter
So even if you
if
hire,
it
let's
is
say,
a
your son.
relative. Yeah, the moment that you have that person, then you enter in the whole
Okay.
realm of either a part-time or full-time employees.
Okay, because I think that's really important because I think
Of
a lot
course
of
it is.
people, because this is what I've heard, well, I'm just going to hire a family member, my sister,
Right.
my brother, but if they're on your payroll versus
Bingo. And you know
as
that.
your list
Exactly.
of managers,
You said it.
you have to
Right.
have workers' comp insurance. It doesn't matter if it's your great-grandmother, you have to have workers' comp
Well,
insurance.
many businesses perhaps they do not hire, but they receive help, but there is no documentation. Therefore, there
Right.
are no, no wages
Okay.
being recorded. But the moment that you record that,
Okay.
then of course you have to go that way.
So let's talk about. I want to bring up another subject that I've heard you talk about a lot. That I've seen that this is a place where a lot of business owners really make that mistake, and that's not keeping track of employee overtime
Right.
and things like that. So the employee maybe doesn't take a lunch. They come in 2 hours early because they love the business and they love the business owner. And again, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, and they're happy to make that sacrifice.
Right.
Until
Well, and
something
you
goes
always
wrong.
have- right. Business is good until
And I love that quote.
we don't pay attention to details.
Right.
And thanks for mentioning that. But that's the case. Either people, because it's a business in the infancy stage and everyone is trying to help, or in some cases, mature businesses that because of the pressure of production, sometimes, even though the law says that you have to provide breaks or pay overtime, they totally don't want to
Right.
pay attention to that.
But why
And-
is that a problem? So what can happen if, let's say, let's say I work for you, and I don't take
Right.
breaks 'cause I love your company, and how can that come back to haunt you? Because it was my choice to come in 2 hours early. It was my choice not to take lunch. So why is that?
Right.
Why would that be your responsibility as a business owner?
Well, even it is your choice, the regulations clearly say that you must, and if anything, it is your choice. I have to
Right.
be clear in order to protect my business
Okay.
from the way I am coming from to say, hey, Rob, it is your choice. However, you are entitled to it. So if you break it down into days, it's to say, I know, but go ahead and take your 15-minute break.
Okay.
I know that you work one additional hour. Either I do a flex time
Okay.
or I compensate you for overtime.
So
But in some cases, people are not doing that.
in a lot of cases, people aren't doing that. I
Exactly.
think what I see.
And what happens is that you go and go, well, something happens.
Okay.
I always say, it's like, cases of sexual harassment. You go and on, and people just say, well, it's easy. Why didn't you say something?
Right.
Easy to say. People will not say something
Mhm.
unless something drastic happens. And it's then that then you have a legal recourse. And if you go to
Okay.
the labor commissioner, then you will present your case and say, I have been working with Marcel or with this small
Mhm.
business. And all of the sudden is like, I feel that they owe me all this time. I never took
Okay.
breaks.
And they can get that time?
In most
So the
cases,
businesses
of course,
could
you
get
have to.
fined
It
and-
goes on a case-by-case basis.
So if I could
Rob.
prove that I never took lunch,
Right.
then really for that year or 2 years I was working with you, in theory,
Right. And in many cases,
you
Rob,
could be
there has
financially-
been businesses that have not even proved, but either the managers say we are too busy.
well, actually, we've just seen that with what Chipotle just got recently.
Exactly.
They got, they were in the news about, that's a similar thing, right?
Exactly. It's a
Okay.
similar thing that, you say we're too busy, and all of a sudden you are denying people from taking breaks.
So that can even come back to haunt, let's say, a 2 or 3 person company, not just a big corporation.
Of course.
Because I think a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs, they almost say like, okay, here's a big corporate issue, but it doesn't affect me as a small business. Like, workers' comp is a big corporate issue. It's an MGM issue. It's a Toyota issue. It's not my issue. The same thing with
Right.
overtime and keeping track of hours or let's
But
say
these
sexual
issues
harassment.
right.
It's not just a corporate issue. It's even if you're a solopreneur and bring in a contractor,
And
that could be an
Rob,
issue.
Because well said, you put it in the right perspective. What matters is the issue,
right?
not the size.
Right.
But I think being a small business, you can conclude exactly what you're saying. This is not an issue for me. It will just play out in
Right.
corporate America.
Yes.
But I think this is the issue regardless, and it could play out even if I have just one employee,
Mhm.
full-time or part-time. So again, it goes back to some of our discussions and what we always say. Business is good until you don't pay attention to details. So why not from the beginning,
Right.
in the formative stages, frame it already correctly?
Okay.
So when the business is finally taking off, finally making
Right.
money, that is not taken away from us because that really matters.
Right.
And that's what happens because at that point, when you're making money,
Mm-hmm.
if you have not done things correctly, is where people are going to come back and say, hey, wait a minute,
Right.
you did not do the right things.
And I think that brings me to something. We'll take a little sidetrack here,
Sure.
since we've got a lot of time left. Something you and I have talked about a lot, and we've trained on a lot: the need for a business plan.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
I think if you do a business plan, you think of these things, and you think about your staffing, and you think about the legal coverage and the HR coverage and all of that stuff, versus just saying, hey, I can do this, and going out and with no plan, do you, in your experience, is there a difference in the regulatory piece of it and the management of that in entrepreneurs that plan their businesses versus entrepreneurs who just wake up one morning and decide today's the day to start something new?
Well, I don't know, just tack what you say, just right now, you say the management piece of it.
Right.
Typically in a business plan, I think we try to frame things and to put something in writing
Yes.
as something in general to manage or to present that information. But
Mhm.
it really, what matters is to have the clarity of all the details
Okay.
from the beginning.
And where do people get that clarity then? Because if I don't know that if I don't know that I need this stuff, and I don't know that I don't know that I need this stuff, where do I get that clarity and where do I
think
get
it's
that?
champions like you and I
Okay.
basically telling people dig deeply into it. And let me see if this makes sense. When you and I go into a business plan, into the financial projections,
Mm-hmm.
there are categories and numbers that will force us
Right.
to pay attention
Yes.
to that. Sometimes when we look at human resources or employees,
Mm-hmm.
we put these general statements in paragraphs and sentences, but not necessarily with matrix.
Okay.
So I will say, the clarity maybe needs to come when you basically have a visual of what is your minimum wage, the visuals of something that says, overtime issues, then I think those things will surface.
Okay.
But if we don't, then they just stay in as general terms. Hopefully
Right.
that makes sense.
It does. It does. But I think what I was trying to get at is, at least for me, when I work on business plans, and you and I have talked about this, is you want to surface all these issues and at least say, oh, I'm going to need staff. So here's 5 questions I need to ask before I make my first hire. Like, what kind of insurances do I provide? Do I provide insurance? Do I use 1099 or do I not use 1099? And
which is another
comp.
Big issue right
Absolutely. Do you want to talk about 1099 or? Because I hear, that's another thing I hear all the time. Well, I'm not going to have employees. I'm just going to have everybody on 1099. And it's not quite, because then I don't have to pay benefits and all that, but it isn't really quite that simple.
Right. Well, you said you want to talk about it. I think yes. But I think what really matters, Rob, is to get with the right expertise.
Right.
To really analyze what makes sense. And to put that to rest, because you cannot just read something and say, well, I reached the conclusion. Again, I reached the conclusion that I can only use 1099s and I will just pay them.
Right.
And I don't have to worry about anything else, meeting workers' compensation and anything else. So I pay $15, $20 an hour. You're doing this project for me. Yeah, I can tell you, given the nature of what I do in training, that makes more sense. But in many cases, it doesn't, because you are directly supervising people.
Well, and we've had situations where businesses have put everybody on 1099, and then after a year or two, they end up with tax liens, and they end up with a lot of IRS problems, even when they've been the ones to go to the IRS and say, hey, I made this mistake, I didn't know. All of a sudden, and then once you have the tax liens, you can't get a loan for your business. It can affect things like government contracts. It can affect a lot of other things. And people thought they were doing the right thing.
But if you need, let's say, like you said, after 2 years, all of a sudden you say, well, I wish I could go back.
But you
then
can't.
At that point you can't.
Right.
Maybe at that point, again, based on what you're asking me, is where were those tips? Did you read enough? Did you get it with the right expertise to put all this in place? And all I am saying is that in some cases, once we look at a business plan, there are very specific things that we know and we provide all the details. There are some areas that we just include general things to complete a business plan.
Right.
But we have never gone into big details.
But these types of things, like this information about what you need, that's something that on your portal, people can at least get directed towards the right people. So if let's say I'm going to hire my very first employees and I don't know anything about human resources, I can go to business.nv.gov
because at that point,
and at least be directed to somebody who can help me, or a website with all the information that can point
because
me in the right
at that
direction.
point, exactly, I think where you wanted to get, Rob, based on your question, is to say, okay, Rob, when it comes to all these labor issues, how about having a formal meeting with someone from the labor commissioner and just sitting down and put it a big check mark to your specific questions, given the nature of what you are going to be doing, either your product or your services. And you put a big check mark, because then you can say, I sat down with the right expertise. It did not cost me anything. And I went through just a general set of questions and a checklist to say, I ask about this,
Right. And I really like what you say about sitting down with the experts. I think a lot of people, you hear things like the Department of Labor, the IRS, the Department of Taxation, the Secretary, Business and Industry, and they sound really intimidating for a lot of people.
Oh, sure.
But my experience is, having sat with the IRS and Business and Industry and the Secretary of State, super approachable. I mean, I have found that people, as as an employee here at the Women's Business Center, as going there, as an entrepreneur with help for other things, extremely approachable. I've had people, really take their time and explain things. So I think that's an unfortunate, let's say, misperception
Right.
about even the SBA, about a lot of these quote unquote huge intimidating organizations. I haven't found them in reality to be intimidating at all. In fact, your team, Carrie, Karen, you,
Right. No,
you guys are amazing.
We
and if
have
you can't help,
a wonderful
you know who
team of
can.
individuals.
Oh, you do.
And yeah, we help people. We connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes back to what you were saying, and that's if we are that regulatory authority, it's not just when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I am asking several of the divisions just to look at where is the education piece.
Right.
As a preventive measure. It's like going to a doctor. We typically, human beings, we go not as a preventive measure,
Right.
but when it happens. But I think we need to do that. If you take the Division of Labor, for example, the
Mm-hmm.
Labor Commissioner, is a set of new programs that basically will educate the public on these
Okay.
basic things, offering workshops that we have not traditionally done
Mm-hmm.
for the public to educate them.
Right. And we're doing this. I mean, this is something that,
And this-
we recently
exactly.
started these webinars just to get information out. I mean, I can talk about business and industry all day, but you are business and industry. I mean, that's your world that
Right.
you.
Right. But again, it goes back to that particular component. It sounds business and industry. Some
Mhm.
people know, it's a regulatory arm.
Right.
Some people confuse us with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And
Okay.
sometimes we have to clarify and say, again, using my two hands, one is the Governor Office of Economic Development is really the recruiting arm of the state for economic development.
Right.
We, business and industry, we are the regulatory authority, but also that huge component of let's provide resources, information, hopefully at no cost
Right.
to individuals so they can succeed. And you and I have worked extensively, Rob,
To get that word out.
And not only that word, but just to say, tie it into a business plan so you are maximizing your resources but minimizing your expenses, because a lot of people just, I'm not saying that they are throwing money.
Mhm.
I don't want to put it that way,
Right.
Rob. But you and I have known enough cases that people are trying to do their best, but they are very inefficient because
Yes.
they are paying $2,000 here, $250 here, for things that
Can be
could
free.
have been free.
I've had people come in and say, "Oh, this company is gonna charge. They're only gonna charge me $1,000 to get my LLC for me."
Right.
I'm like, go online, spend 30 minutes, and don't pay anything extra.
Right.
Save yourself $600.
And in many cases, you need the help of
You
these
do need the
wonderful individuals.
Yes.
But even there, if you're going to pay, it's like I always say, I have the rule of three. If you're going to be doing, and that's what the state does, for
Mhm.
everything that we need to identify 3 vendors
Okay.
for everything that we do,
Right.
basically. Because then you are saying, what's the price, what's the offering,
Mhm.
and you have a better selection instead of just sometimes jumping
Yes.
and getting the services of just one person and then finding out, my goodness, I pay $1,000, but in reality, the fair market value of this service was 250 of them.
And that's something that I think, the Women's Business Center and other organizations really play a huge role, is being that, let's say, sort of unbiased, uninvested sounding board.
Right.
Because people have come to me and said, "Oh, I just need a website," and I talked to this company, they want to charge me $7,000. What do you need? Well, I just want, a little bit of information and a contact page. It's like, well, you can do that for free on this site, and that company is trying to charge them for databases and all the stuff that they don't want and they don't need and they're never going to use.
Right.
And I tell people, when you come to me, I don't get a commission if you get this insurance or that insurance. My income is not affected whether or not whatever you do, because our services are free. That's it.
Right.
So I can really be that sounding board. And I refer a lot of people to you or to business and industry, because they'll start talking about stuff. Well, I was told to put everybody 1099, or I was told I didn't need workers' comp insurance if I did my business this way. It's like, okay, well, you need to go to, business and industry portal and look at that. And I think that that's a role that we play. You guys play that as well, where we can really be that sounding board, because we aren't financially attached to what they purchase, what they don't purchase. We're not invested in their business, so we're not emotional. We're not, we don't have that fear for them or any of that. Nor do we tend to tell people what they necessarily want to hear. And that's something that I've always admired in you, is that I've seen you basically, tell people what they need to hear, even though they may not leave very happy, but they're going to leave educated, and they're going to leave with what they want to know.
Well, and equally, Rob, you and I, our work is how many times we have to tell people, because very often people come after the fact.
Yes. And that's one of my pet
that.
peeves.
Exactly. And how many times part of our work, you and I and everyone else, is basically saying, open up to that sounding board approach. That people sometimes, I don't know if they are trying to protect their business idea or and it goes on and on.
Right.
But they don't open up. And they have to open up.
Yes.
To raise awareness, to get education, to become proficient in many, many things. I always, I use the acronym ACT, A-C-T. And I always say, when it comes to a business idea, make sure that you have the A for attitude, a very positive attitude. The C for either commitment or competency. You have to become competent. And part of that C of competent is to open up.
Yes.
Open up. You need to open up. Not with relatives and friends, because they always
They'll tell you what you want to hear.
Right. And they will support what you're doing. But with the with the right expertise that will give you, hopefully in a very caring way, a reality check. Right. And the T basically is for what I call this, you need to train your mind.
Yes.
You have to, it's my training component, but it's become, if you're becoming proficient, train yourself. Train yourself to always do well.
Well, and one thing I say a lot in classes and when I've been on panels and stuff, and people talk about, my past as an entrepreneur, because I've had businesses that have succeeded and are still out there, and I've had businesses that just didn't. And my first business especially, because my first business was all about ego. And I learned really quick that ego has no place in business. And ego is different than confidence. I think you need to be confident in what you're doing. But for me, I could not park my ego long enough to ask for help, to go to the people that could have provided help. I surrounded myself with the people that were telling me what an amazing business I had,
absolutely,
and all of that. And what happened? It came crashing down, and there were tax issues involved because, of course, I didn't pay attention. They weren't going to come after me. I'm just a little guy. I don't really make enough money. Right. I'll deal with it later. And I hear that my story from 20 years ago repeated on a weekly basis working here.
And exactly, many of the phone calls or the people that we meet is the story, that
it's my old story,
itself.
just a different.
Right. And the difference is, Rob, you and I have gone through it.
Yes.
It's not just an academic or that we read something in the book, but it's something that we have gone through. And then at least we can articulate that and challenge, I think, people in a very caring way, but
absolutely
challenge them more effectively to say, you may not like to hear what I have to say, but here it is.
Right.
With the understanding that any business idea is great, but how to frame it, how to put it together,
and again,
that's another issue.
I think
and you and I know that.
Right, and I think people too need to realize that what we give is advice. It's still up.
Right.
We can't stop somebody, make somebody. We're not going to get in somebody's way if they're, but I think even if people choose not to take the advice, and I've been wrong, you've been wrong, we're going to be wrong again, right? Nobody's got that crystal ball.
Absolutely.
But I think that entrepreneurs should at least take the time to use those sounding boards, to use business and industry, or you personally, or Women's Business Center, or me, or whoever, do themselves really a great service. It's worth, 5 or 6 hours worth of conversations for a lifetime of, putting your business on the track for success instead of just, I can do this, I don't need anybody, because I'm sure you couldn't, if you were to start a new business, you and your wife wouldn't just do it completely on your own. You would get advice from people.
Oh,
absolutely. And you've been in business for 30 some years.
Absolutely.
You know business.
Right. I can
I
tell
would
you
not
that
do it on my
part
own.
of my success of still being here and saying, and we still have a business, is because we have tapped into all these resources,
Right.
and tried to listen as much as we could.
Absolutely.
The decision making at the end of the day is the individual.
Absolutely.
But at least we have taken the time. And I think I like what you were saying, because I'm just making the difference how important it is. We talk about either a business idea or a business plan.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, is really taking the time
Exactly.
to learn, to train your mind, to train yourself to learn components of a business plan, and not just treat it as a formality to either get a loan or because you need one.
Right. Right. So we've got a few minutes left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's gone by really quick. I
My
love our
goodness.
conversations,
That's-
actually.
Always.
So, BNI, also, you guys organize events.
Yes,
and
we do.
you've got one coming up in, 4 weeks from today, is it?
That's right. A month from today, on August 17th, we
Okay.
have the Governor's Conference on Business. It's an annual event that we have
Okay.
been offering since 2012. So this is going to be the 6th year.
Okay.
It's going to be in Reno,
Okay.
specifically Sparks at the Nugget.
Okay.
And it's a wonderful opportunity again for people to attend, connect the dots, basically be exposed to the wonderful resources out
Okay.
there, and listen to new ideas. We're going to have one breakout session that is going to be the Internet of Things. A lot
Okay.
of noise when it comes to the Internet of Things, but do we really know what it is and how we need to apply it to our small
Okay.
business? So we want to have a conversation. We're going to have a business pitch competition.
Oh, you guys did that last year. That was awesome.
Yeah,
that was really
another
awesome.
opportunity for real businesses. About 8 or 10 of them will be competing for real
Okay.
money. The first prize is $5,000
Right.
cash.
Actually, one of our clients last year was one of the finalists. She didn't actually win, but Marcella Williams, she was
absolutely.
she was one of the finalists. Yeah.
Terrific.
That's
And
an
then,
awesome
of course, just a conversation. The governor is going to
Okay.
be the keynote speaker.
Okay.
And he always has something great to say as a macro picture,
Right.
especially right now with all the small businesses in the high-tech industry that is
Okay.
happening. And that also, our director, Bruce Breslow, is also focused on
Okay.
a lot of activities that are happening in the technology area that are
Right.
so important for the state.
Absolutely.
The job market is changing, and you know that,
Mhm.
Rob. It's drastically changing what Nevada was 10 years ago or
Right.
20 years ago. The new Nevada really is changing in terms of the different companies coming into the state and the jobs that are going to be available in this market.
Absolutely. Well, we are actually going to be participating at the Governor's Conference in Reno. So Leanne and I are both going to be there. We have a table, so stop by if you happen to be in Reno.
Exactly.
Visit us. Visit Marcel. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it. So, is there anything else that we have not talked about as far as business and industry or being an entrepreneur?
One component that is important. Back in March, we moved into here in Las
That's
Vegas.
right.
We moved into a new facility, 3300 West Sahara.
And so, Sahara, what's your nearest cross street?
It's between Spanish Oaks and Valley View.
Okay, got it.
That stretch over there. And we basically centralized 10 of our divisions. the idea is sort of this one-stop service
Okay.
on one hand, but also on the other hand, efficiencies in terms of not having so many divisions all over the place.
Right.
So we're happy to be at a new place. It has been over 90 days, and it's coming along very nicely in terms of just efficiencies and being able to provide services.
Okay.
And along with that, of course, some new programming. And
Okay.
we're partnering with different agencies, including the Nevada
Yep.
Business Opportunity
Absolutely.
Fund, to offer new programming, which is
Mhm.
basically what you're doing so well here at the Nevada
Thanks.
Business
Thanks.
Opportunity Fund. Because, yeah, we have resource partners that already do different training very well, as you know.
Right.
We could, I think there is always room, but why compete? I
Right.
think we need to, there are too many variables, too many things. That's part of our discussion
Yes.
today, for people just to get educated, to get informed.
And you and I have
To
always
make
talked
better
about
decisions.
that it's always been about collaboration, never competition.
Absolutely.
And as long as, in my opinion, as long as people get help, as long as they get the correct information, so I think it's important that people don't just Google stuff and get information from whatever sources it comes from, but really go to the subject
Right.
matter experts, because you could read somebody's blog about 1099s or workers' comp, and that may or may not be the latest information. It may not even be accurate information. And the
Right.
problem is, at the end of the day, if an entrepreneur, whatever an entrepreneur does, it doesn't matter where they get the information from. At the end of the day, they're accountable. So if you
Exactly.
get the wrong information and you act
Well,
from that,
I love what you're saying.
you can't go back and say, yeah, but I pulled it off of this blog over here.
Right. And with the online information, let's face it,
You don't know.
the information is there. All the
Right.
resources are there. But I always ask people, are we in the capacity to interpret the information
Yes.
well? Are we taking the time not only to interpret the information,
Mhm.
but also to ask the question, what does it mean to my particular business or industry?
Right.
Because we're thrown with information or statistical data, but then what does it mean? How does it apply? And if we allow ourselves to open up and sit down with individuals such as yourself or any other in the area of helping the small business, that's what we need to know. That's what we need to do.
Right.
Because that's exactly what we see very often, day in and day out, Rob. Wonderful individuals that come to us after the fact.
Yeah.
They have already
And
made
it's
a
heartbreaking because
Right.
most of the time it could have been prevented if they would have. And I don't think it's not because they knew the resources were out there and chose not to use them. Just a lot of people just don't even know that you exist or I exist or
Right.
any of these free resources exist until
Right.
they've made so many
and
mistakes.
one of the things when people call me, I always will listen to them, and I always say, I know that you read the information, but do me a favor. Call back, for example, if it is licensing,
Mhm.
call back and speak with someone
Yes.
and put a set of check marks to the information. Therefore, you're documenting and you have a record to say, not I only read the information, I am ready to apply, but I also called someone
Right.
and I was able just to, in addition to that, and if it comes back to you, at least you will have a record, a date, a record of it, and you say, but I called the department, I spoke with such and such person,
Right.
and this is what I was told.
Especially when you get into stuff that's so, let's say, that is regulatory, is legal.
Yes.
Sometimes you and I could read the same sentence, and you're going to have one understanding, and I'm going to have something different, and which of us is correct? So I think it's
Right.
very important to get that validated by whoever the authority is, whoever the subject matter expert is on that. And again, don't just Google it, because that, again, could be somebody else, yet a third interpretation of something that is also maybe not 100% accurate.
Right. And from the state perspective, when it comes to regulations, we know is
Right.
always what I call continuous improvement, is always to revisit. to make it more accessible, to regulate
Absolutely.
less. But do we need regulation? The answer is always yes.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, our lives and our societies and the marketplace is too complex. You always need regulation.
And our information is free, though.
Exactly.
So there's no reason,
Right. Including, last year in September when Uber came into town, and there needs to be some set of regulations.
Right.
Minimal, but someone has to
Something.
regulate the industry.
Absolutely.
And that's what we do. But again, it goes back to what you're saying is this, make sure that we just put in a check
Right.
mark to some of the things.
It's worth the phone call to save yourself a potential lawsuit, fines, going out of business, whatever that happens to be. It's
Because
worth a couple
there,
of phone
I think,
calls.
is where the right expertise comes.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's no different when someone calls me and I put the person in touch with you. I will say, sit down with Rob.
Yes.
Because then you will have all your questions answered and specifically tackle your case. Because
Right.
otherwise it's too general. I can only provide general information, especially being this resource of information, to provide information and resources out there. But that's what we do.
Okay. Well, we have just a couple minutes left. If you want to, again, give your URL, maybe a number, if anybody wants to make that phone call and check a couple things off their list with BNI.
Oh, sure. Again, it's very simple. All you have to remember is business.nv.gov. Just that portal, the leading point of contact for anything related to starting, running, and growing a business in Nevada. And if people want to call me directly, my phone number is 702-486-4492.
Great. Well, thank you for your time.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you
Rob.
so much for joining us. It's always
Thank
great
you.
to have these conversations with you. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching. Again, my name is Rob Sealander. I'm the Business Development Officer here at the Nevada Women's Business Center. So if you would like to contact me or any one of my colleagues, Leanna or Kathleen, to talk about any of these things or anything else with your business, give us a call, 702-734-3555, or you can visit our website, nevadawbc.com. Again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.